Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's another edition of Let's Talk Broncos. I'm excited to be here today. It feels like it's been forever. I think, Zach, the last time we recorded was right after the Broncos lost in the playoffs. So it's been a bit. How are you feeling today, though, man?
Feeling good, feeling good. We took a week off, getting our off-season schedule sorted, but we're gonna have a lot of exciting content for the people. Excited, really excited for this off-season. Last year was kind of the talking yourself into the optimism. They're finally climbing out of the muck, and now they're seemingly out of it, and we can start really looking ahead to building towards contention and building to try and compete for a division title and all that stuff, which I think is going to be a lot more fun to talk about. And I'm just cool. It's a whole different realm than you and I have gotten to live in as analysts for as long as we've done this.
No, you're absolutely right. And you know what, though? Also, what comes with that is new expectations. It's new expectations for the Broncos this offseason and then especially next season. New expectations all around. The Broncos, if they don't make the playoffs, it is like we're not just happy to be there. We are expecting to make it this next year. That is the expectation going forward for the Broncos. It's going to be a jam-packed offseason. We have the Senior Bowl coming up very, very shortly. I want everyone to go make sure you're following Jacob Romano on Twitter, Frankie Abbott on Twitter. They're both going to be at the Senior Bowl and be Let's Talk Broncos representatives there, writing articles, doing content down there. I want to make sure I get a podcast with them so I get a question both of them on what they saw. So please make sure you're going to do that. There's going to be, I bet you, more than one future Bronco at the Senior Bowl. And if you want the inside scoop before everybody else, make sure you're following those two. I don't know. It's just going to be a really fun offseason, man. I'm excited about how I don't have to think about the quarterback position for the first time in quite a while.
So nice.
It is so nice. I don't have to think about Cam Ward. I don't even have to think about Shedeur Sanders, go bust. But I don't have to think about that at all. It's about putting pieces around the quarterback and making it work that way. And we're going to get into our biggest offseason needs in this episode. But first, I wanted to tackle some coaches that could be leaving the Broncos who may leave. I'm not going to say all these guys are leaving. All of them may stay together. But who may leave? Zach, who do you have as the most likely coach on the Broncos staff now who could leave for a promotion or another job in a different situation?
Jim Leonard. I think it's Jim Leonard by a wide margin here. Chris Banjo seems to maybe be the favorite for the special teams coordinator position, with the Jets. But I've heard from multiple places now that Jim Leonard is pretty much lined up to be the Nebraska defensive coordinator unless he becomes the Broncos defensive coordinator. Yes.
I had no idea about this.
I guess I forgot to mention this to you. I'm sorry about this, Joey. I should have told you this at some point. But yeah, I've heard that Jim Leonard is well in line to be Nebraska's defensive coordinator if he doesn't become the Broncos defensive coordinator. Part of the reason I want Vance Joseph to get a head coaching job during this cycle, looks less likely now, but maybe the Raiders come through, is you're probably going to lose one of these guys this year. And, if it's not like if it's Vance Joseph, you'll get picks and you'll have your DC of the future. If it's Jim Leonard that you lose, which is what's going to almost certainly happen if Vance Joseph doesn't get hired away, then there's a good chance Vance Joseph gets hired away next year. And then you don't really have a built-in succession plan at defensive coordinator. So I think Jim Leonard is the most likely to leave. I'd say there's probably an 80% chance of him leaving right now, unfortunately.
Really?
And I think that might hurt the Broncos. I think it would, because he's been so valuable. Like the physicality this defensive backfield has played with this year, I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. And the leap they've taken from last season, I think he deserves a lot of credit for that as well. So yeah, that's one of the big offseason storylines I'm monitoring. I hope they're able to hold on to him, but think he might be out the door.
So I had no idea about this. That's very, very interesting. I find it especially interesting because Jim Leonard had defensive coordinator jobs lined up in college prior to this year. Plenty of them, too. Jim Leonard, for those that don't know, it was one of the most coveted college defensive coordinators in all of the sport. What he did at Wisconsin was terrific. He brings a unique style. It's very Rex Ryan-esque. He obviously played under that system. It's just he's an NFL player. He has all of that going for him. Wisconsin had one of the best defenses in college football when he was down there. He was the interim head coach. I know USC wanted him, for example. I know he was coveted. I figured with Jim Leonard, the reason why he went to the NFL is like, okay, the college landscape is changing with the NIL and everything to do about that. But now, so everything's changing. The lifestyle's changed. It's harder to coach in college than the NFL in this era. That's why you see college coaches trying to jump from that sport to the NFL so consistently. So I thought that was the reason, but that is very interesting, Zach. I like that you dropped that nugget on us. I had no idea.
Yeah, and I hope it. I mean, I want the best for everyone involved, but yeah, I hope Jim Leonard stays as DC in Denver with the Broncos. You know, I think you raise a lot of good points. I hope whatever scuttlebutt I'm hearing is off base, because yeah, I think Jim Leonard has been incredibly valuable to this staff, and it would really hurt to lose him. Outside of him, though, I think it'd be Chris Banjo. He's getting really tied to Aaron Glenn's staff as a likely special teams coordinator there with the Jets. You know, that one sucks because it seems like it's either going to be him or Rizzi for the Broncos special teams coordinator job. So that would kind of leave the Broncos with only one of their ideal options. That said, it seems like they're pretty much a shoe-in to get Rizzi, and Rizzi is their number one overall option. So I'm not overly worried about Banjo leaving. More than anything, good on him. Glad he's taking a step forward in his coaching career, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think those are the two that are most likely, Zach. You just named them right there. Jim Leonard and then Chris Banjo are the two most likely. Now, beyond that, I would say, Van Joseph has obviously taken head coaching interviews. There's just not a lot of jobs left. We've gotten hires in a lot of them through this time. Now, after the Jaguars fired Balake, do you think that they now reset and they're like, okay, all the options are available. We have to recenter ourselves. We have to figure this out. Or is it even still Robert Saleh, who I've heard was their third option after the other two turned down the job? Did you still think that Robert Saleh is still that, or is it kind of a reset?
I think it's a little column A, little column B. Like not all the options are on the table for them because they shot themselves in the foot, and now their top two, Ben Johnson and Liam Cohen, have removed themselves from the table. So that's one element of that. I think on the other side, it is a reset. Because before you were looking for head coach candidates to kind of have this arranged marriage with a GM. Now you're looking for a head coach and GM to come in together, which also, again, this sucks because if they just made this very obvious right decision 4 weeks ago, I think Ben Johnson very well may be the head coach of the Jaguars right now.
I agree.
Because the Bears' big thing was they had the quarterback. The Raiders' big thing, it was surprising that he was attracted there. And then it came out, well, he likes them because they've got an owner that's willing to spend. Mark Davis isn't, he's fairly cash poor relative to the other owners, but he's willing to spend, reinvest the profits from the team into the team. And he felt like he could maybe get some patience there. That one always seemed more murky than Shad Khan, who is constantly spending money on the Jags and is patient to a fault. So if he wanted, like money, power. Oh, also the big thing in Las Vegas, the main reason I shouldn't go gloss over this was the fact he'd get to pick his own GM. So if the Jags just made this right decision from the jump, he'd have the money he wanted, the power he wanted, the patience he wanted, and a viable answer at quarterback. Liam Cohen, I think if Balky's not involved, Liam Cohen probably keeps his name in the mix. So now they're on to maybe option 3. But Robert Saleh, what GM are you bringing in with him? I mean, maybe Joe Douglas, if you want to give Joe Douglas another bite of the apple, but he had a lot of misses in New York. I don't know about Robert Saleh's other GMing connections. So is he a guy you want to bring in when, I think it's one thing to like Robert Saleh is kind of desperate for a coaching opportunity now, or a head coaching opportunity. He's going to be hard pressed to find.
Yeah.
So you can kind of force that arranged marriage. Whereas, now you want a head coach to kind of be a figurehead of the whole operation, more like a Sean Payton type, because he's kind of going to be picking who the GM is that he's going to be working with. And he's probably going to be the final shot caller there. I don't know what direction the Jags are going to go now. Maybe it is Vance Joseph. I would not take that off the table because to your question, I think it is a hard reset at this point.
What is the one? I'm forgetting his name right now. The Broncos had an assistant to George Payton interview for the Jets. Moogie. So I'm thinking that in a situation, right? Like this is just all hypothetical. This is all just.
I was about to say the same thing.
If Moogie were to get Vance Joseph and Moogie could possibly be a pairing for GM and head coach somewhere. Pretty much all the options are off the table, as we just mentioned. It's Vegas and Jacksonville still left, waiting to hiring head coaches. It sounds like Vegas kind of has their list going. Now, I brought up the Blocky point because they fired him. I don't know what happens. I don't even know if Saleh is still their third option anymore, right? How much input did the former GM have in Saleh being the third option, and now he's gone? So I don't know. I don't know what the situation is there. I just maybe Vance Joseph is one. Another thing is, okay, let's say Vance Joseph goes. Who's an offensive coordinator for Vance Joseph? I would look at Davis Webb for the Broncos, quarterback coach, right? Do you think Davis Webb is deserving of an offensive coordinator position, Zach?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing in the NFL is cultivating the quarterback position. And Davis Webb, limited sample here, but it looks like he's pretty strong at doing that. What we've seen from Bo Nix, I think, is really promising. Again, and no one else in the NFL really had the faith in him that this Broncos staff had in him, and they've been really proven right so far. He's incredibly young. I think he's like not even 35. So he's way younger than even like a Sean McVay type was when McVay got his Rams gig. But I think offensive coordinator is going to be around the corner. I think teams probably want to see one more year from him because, again, he is just such a young coach.
Right.
But I think next year, if the Broncos stay on an upward trajectory, and the AFC is going to be tougher next year. It was kind of a down year in the AFC with the Dolphins and the Bengals and then the Jags just falling off a cliff. But if they go 10-7 again, and then the offense takes a big step forward, and they're more like a top 10-ish offense instead of a top 16 offense, then I think there's a great chance he gets hired away. I think he's a year off, though. He's still pretty green.
He is very young. I mean, this quarterback coach job was his first coaching job in the NFL, and he just got it when Sean Payton was hired. That was his first NFL coaching job. So he has a little bit to go. I think that's all I have on my list. I mean, I'll honorably mention David Shaw, who is a personnel executive with the Broncos. I could see him try to get into coaching realm. I have a hard time seeing him get into the personnel executive roles. Right now, he has so much experience in coaching. This last year was his first year as an NFL kind of executive type role. GM would be the next roll up type of thing. He's not ready for that. I would look at him as a coach somewhere. It's just probably not going to happen for him this offseason. I think he's still going to be a Bronco, in my opinion, unless he wanted to make the jump back to college football. That would be very possible.
I fully agree. I will say, though, the college coaches operate a lot like a GM, an NFL GM. And I do wonder, maybe this is the path he's going down now at this point in his career. I legitimately don't know. I haven't seen a quote from him either direction. But if he is going down the personnel route, Moogie, I think, is a more logical tie for Vance Joseph just because he's higher ranking member. He's the assistant GM. But David Shaw as another member of
That'd be so interesting.
that Broncos front office that's well regarded. I wonder if he could maybe be the pairing with Vance Joseph. I'd say that's way less likely.
Yeah.
That's one that if it came to fruition, the Broncos would not get 2 compensatory third rounders. They would get 4 compensatory third rounders. And that would be
insane.
game changing for their outlook. So hopefully the Raiders do that.
Shout out to the Raiders. I mean, man, Tom Brady joined the Raiders. I grew up hating Tom Brady. It only makes sense that he's a Raider now, man. It's bad news over there. All right, let's move into the main topic of the show today, which is the biggest needs this offseason. I think we're going to lightly touch on who could fill some of these roles as well. We're going to go with offense today, and we have 3 positions. I first wanted to start off with running back Zach. How big of a need is running back to this Broncos team? Like, I thought it was atrocious this last year. What do you have to say about that?
I think it's the biggest need. I think the tight end room is worse. I think running back is more important for this team taking the next step. The foundation is there for the Broncos to be a really great rushing offense.
It's annoying.
It's crazy to say, and I know everyone got mad when this was alluded to in the past during the regular season, but the bones of not only a good run game but a great run game are there. The Broncos have a lot of overlap with the 2024 Broncos, that is, with the 2023 Philadelphia Eagles, where you have this really great offensive line that's opening some stuff up for your running backs, and they're just not getting the most out of it. They're not getting what they should be getting out of it. Now, there's not a Saquon Barkley out there. There's not a Derrick Henry out there in this cycle, so I don't think you'll see that ridiculous a leap. But this is a rushing attack that they're 11th in the NFL in yards before contact per attempt. If you isolate it to running backs, just running back carries, they're 6th in the NFL in yards before contact per attempt. So what does that tell you? It's blocked up well, which is one, offensive line execution, but 2, the scheming, right? If it's a bad scheme, if it's drawn up bad on the whiteboard and it doesn't make any sense, doesn't really matter if the players are great. It's not going to be a successful play consistently. Broncos ranked 9th in a rushing success rate, 11th in rushing success rate. So they're a top third of the league run game when you just isolate offensive line and the scheming of it all. That potential is there. Now, when you isolate the running backs, you get the exact opposite story. They're 30th out of 32 teams in yards after contact per attempt. Javonte Williams ranks dead last in the NFL among all running backs in yards after contact per attempt. Remember, that was his whole thing, right? Javonte Williams getting yards after contact, last in the NFL, 41 of 41. He is 4th worst in EPA per attempt. That's 38th rather out of 41. He is 40th, 2nd worst in rushing yards over expectation per attempt. So that's 3 big metrics that attempt to isolate the running back. Each of them are telling you that this is one of the 3 worst running backs in the sport right now. One of the 4 worst running backs in the sport right now. I mean, that's an incredibly damaging thing. And again, the Broncos, top third of the NFL run game, ultimately, in terms of success rate. I think even in terms of EPA, they're top 20-ish. Despite these running backs shooting the run game in the foot very regularly. Sometimes these NFL problems are very complicated, and it's a lot of different moving parts. I really think this one is simple. Upgrading center, I think, would be nice. That would definitely help. The running backs are really bad. This was the worst running back room in the NFL last year. There was a lot there for them to gobble up if they were capable of doing it, but they squandered those opportunities. And as a result, the Broncos' run game was lackluster. As you go into year 2, and things are going to get tougher for Bo Nix in year 2 as defenses now know his strengths and weaknesses. He's going to get game planned for a little more. He's going to be forced to play left-handed some. You don't want to do to him what the Texans did to CJ Stroud this past year, when CJ Stroud didn't have a run game or a line he could kind of fall back on, or a running back he could fall back on when Joe Mixon was injured. this class is loaded with dudes. If the Broncos have a bad running back room next year, it'll be embarrassing. There's so many avenues to fixing it this offseason.
Yeah, there really is. You hit the nail on the head in a lot of aspects. Javonte Williams' game was built upon yards after contact. That was his game. Even coming out of college, go back and read some of the scouting reports on Javonte Williams. No one was sitting there being like, Javonte Williams has great vision. Matter of fact, that was in the negative column of Javonte Williams. So now I'm taking away a player's ability to break tackles and make stuff happen in that fashion. And I'm also still giving him that negative of, okay, he doesn't have great vision. It's just hard to run the football when we're talking about that football player. Like that's tough. And then, okay, we could go up and down the rest of the line here. Jaleel McLaughlin, very one-trick pony-ish, right? Good vision, fast, kind of electric. Not the greatest. He's not going to fall forward on many runs. He's a tell in a lot of aspects. He can't catch the ball out of the backfield often. He's not running complex routes out of the backfield often. And then he's not blocking literally at all. Okay, Audric Estime, he barely played this year for a plethora of reasons. And even him, I think
benched
he's
for the playoffs.
What was that?
Benched for the playoff game. Just wanted to add that in there. Like, they barely played. And then in the biggest spot, they were like, a healthy scratch.
Yeah. And Estime has a role, I think. It's just not anywhere near lead back. It's nowhere near that, right? He's not ready as a pass blocker yet, which is something that people were arguing me up and down the timeline about that today. I don't know what people are looking at. He's big. He has the capabilities to pass block well, pass pro. He's just not picking up his assignment right. And that's probably part of the reason why he was benched in that playoff game. So the Broncos running back situation, all of them are replaceable level. I think you could go into this offseason. I'm writing an article. It's coming out very soon. I sent it to Zach tonight for editing. I just finished it.
This weekend, I bet it's out.
This weekend? Okay.
Yeah, I'll get it out this weekend. I'll try and do tomorrow or Friday, but we'll see what I can get done.
If you want the article, tweet at Zach Seegers.
Yeah, tweet at me. Pound out my door. Get the torches. Get
it out.
That'll honestly be effective. That'll.
But I have an article coming out on draft eligible running backs. I did my top 8. I watched about 12, 13, something like that. Different running backs. All the popular names I heard. All of them were solid. All of them were definitely draftable. And most of them were upgrades on what the Broncos would have this year. So I'm excited to put that article out. I hope everyone checks that out. I just think this is one of the Broncos' biggest needs. If you can transform this run game, the Broncos' offense would be a ton better. This is an offense that I think is going to thrive staying ahead of the sticks consistently. And how you do that is with an effective run game. And they're going to have ample opportunity to this offseason. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, same. And really quick, Joey, tell us about some of the draft options, because the veteran options are not that great. We've gone over the whole or the need and why the Broncos need to address it. Some of the options to fill it, veteran ones, I'll touch on it quick because I don't think there's that many that are exciting. You've got Aaron Jones and Najee Harris. Those are probably the big name options. But I don't think that's the route you want to go. Aaron Jones was fine this past year, but Minnesota's run game was pretty dang rough, and he was a big part of that for most of the season. Najee Harris, I don't think has lived up to his first round billing at all. I think I think you'd be signing him because of his 24/7 recruiting score, which seems like a questionable reason to sign a guy at age 27. And then Nick Chubb, I saw some hype for Nick Chubb to the Broncos today. I mean, what are we talking about here? The guy has had his leg snapped in half the wrong way
at 30.
Then ended this season with a broken foot. Oh, and I mean, he didn't qualify for those Javonte Williams metrics when I was, rattling off rushing yards over expectation, and he didn't reach the minimal qualifying factors to be among those 41 backs. But he's worse than Javonte Williams in all those numbers. So he'd be a downgrade. I don't know. The idea that he would be fixing any of the problems is bonkers to me. I mean, if we can travel back in time to 2021, sign me up. But otherwise, no thank you.
I'll give you a replacement for like a Nick Chubb or Javonte Williams, that type of running back. I think everyone knows about him, and it's Cam Scadaboo, the Arizona State running back. You even mentioned Najee Harris. I think if you're looking for that type of guy, Cam Scadaboo, if we're not talking about the Omarion Hamptons of the world, who you might have to take in that first round pick, I could definitely see him go in the first round at the end of the day.
Scadaboo's got crazy contact balance.
Crazy contact balance. He's huge. I think he's like 5'10", 225, big back, runs low to the ground, shoulders in front of him, delivers the hit. I think the most interesting part about him is he's usually when you're talking about running backs like him, all right, I'm describing this big bruising type of running back. You're talking about a guy, okay, we definitely need to get him in a gap power system, and we're running him up the middle every single time. I think Scadaboo is a little more interesting. I think I would prefer him to run in kind of like an inside zone type of system. His vision is terrific. I think he finds the cutback lane consistently. He weaves in and out of his linemen. He's patient. He sets those blockers up. I also think he's a really good receiver. He almost had 600 yards receiving this last year for Arizona State. He has solid hands, can run all of the traditional routes out of the backfield that you're looking for your running back. He's a good player, really good player.
Yeah, what I saw from him in the playoffs, and I haven't studied him like you have, it's really exciting from what I saw. Now, I feel like most of our audience will be familiar with Scadaboo just because he got so much hype, with the conference championships, and then the college football playoff, all that. Some of the Heisman talk too. Omarion Hampton, I know you're a big fan of his.
Yeah.
I know you kind of talked about him being maybe the higher tier version of Cam Scadaboo, maybe a first round option. But I don't think the Broncos are going to shy away from drafting a running back in the first round if they fall in love with a guy. What could Broncos country expect from Omarion Hampton?
Ridiculous contact balance. A lot of people, Broncos fans at least, I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, we don't need another Javonte Williams. Guys, we need to stop the helmet scouting. That never has made sense. It never does it. So if Omarion Hampton went to CU, we'd like him all of a sudden. Stop it. We're not doing all of that. It makes no sense at all. But ridiculous contact balance. I think he's ready day one as a third down back as well. I think he can play in those obvious passing situations. He's an asset in the passing game. And unlike another UNC running back on the Broncos right now, has really good vision as well. He runs super angry, has really good vision, finds the correct hole, can press the mesh point really well, cut back, find holes on the opposite side. He's an awesome running back. Hint for my article tomorrow. He's, in my opinion, the second best running back in this class over Caleb Johnson, over all these other guys in this class. So Omarion Hampton is really ridiculous. He would reinvent this Broncos running game very quick if he ends up in blue and orange next year.
Now, who do you think, just put yourself in George Payton's shoes for a minute, okay. And we're very early in this process. We don't know where really guys will go, but right now, based on, kind of what we think, what running back do you think is kind of the best bang for your buck? Or is there a guy you're hoping the Broncos end up with where not necessarily the best guy, but man, I think this fit makes so much sense. It's right in the sweet spot. For example, Gunnar Helm. I think, you might think some tight end prospects are better than Gunnar Helm, but you're like, hey, I think Gunnar Helm's 95% of those guys, 90% of those guys, and I can get him in round 3. Is there a version of that for you at running back?
For me, it would be, I don't know about round 3. Maybe it's round 3. Maybe it's round 2. You never know with these running backs, and especially in such a stacked class, Zach, it's very confusing. Like, I was texting you. I was like, man, I'm having a hard time stacking these guys up on my list because I feel like I'm just picking the style I like. That is how stacked that group is. A guy that would make a lot of sense, though, for Sean Payton, in my opinion, is Devin Neal from Kansas. That's a dude that he's not to that level, but similar play style, like aesthetically, archetype wise, to like an Alvin Kamara. The balance specifically is something. Alvin Kamara was always known as the balance guy. Like, okay, he wasn't going to deliver the hit, but man, could he absorb contact, bounce off of a guy? The guy could chop his legs out from under him. Wow, how is he still on his feet? That's what I kind of see in Devin Neal, along with being a plus in the passing game as well. We all know, I mean, everyone sat here and watched it on our we're all Broncos fans here in this chat. Everyone knows there's a lot of complaining about how many screens, man. You throw so many screens. The Devin Neal would be a huge asset in the screen games, as was Alvin Kamara. Devin Neal would make a ton of sense for the Broncos, man. I think that's a guy everyone should circle, underline, all of that.
Absolutely. I love that name. And one last vet I'll throw out there. If the Broncos
Yeah.
want to upgrade on a Jaleel McLaughlin on that role in their room, Ty Johnson, the guy who caught that crazy touchdown in the playoffs for the Bills, he's an upcoming free agent. I think there's a very good chance the Bills let him walk. You want to talk about maybe maximizing what you're getting out of the screen game a bit more. He'd be another good option for that.
Yeah, Ty Johnson was vital in that. I mean, James Cook was known for having really good hands and being a receiver type of back out of Georgia, but Ty Johnson is clearly even better because he took that role from James Cook. James Cook is kind of their runner, and Ty Johnson took that third down role as a receiver and as a pass blocker even for that team. So Ty Johnson's a good call. He'd make a ton of sense in the Broncos offense. The next position I want to hop to, Zach, is tight end. Tight end, I think, was probably pound for pound their weakest position this year.
I'd agree.
For the Broncos, they really sucked at it.
Yes, terrible. I mean, Adam Troutman is not starting for any other team in the league, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think he is either. He just he's a zero in the pass game, and he's a cool blocker. That's how I would describe him. He's not even like elite.
Yeah, it's he's really not good. I mean, it's crazy how unproductive he's been as a tight end. Like, we joke about the revolving door of generic tight ends the Broncos have had in the last decade, and even amongst that really unimpressive crop, he stands out as especially unimpressive when you look at the numbers. It's I don't get it, man. I don't get it. They need to find a little more juice there, whether it be a vet, whether it be a draft pick. You have to
They had to find something there. I agree with you. I think the Broncos could upgrade at both inline and move tight end, both of them. For a lot of people like tying in all the tight ends together. Those are two different positions, inline tight end and move tight end. The move tight end is going to be your more athletic one. I can throw him in the slot in the Broncos case. Sometimes I'm moving him around, right? Like, I'm doing different stuff from him when he's off the line of scrimmage. My inline tight end is more of what we're talking about with Adam Troutman. He's going to do a lot more of the dirty work. He's your Daniel Graham. You're right. This is the way I would put it for Broncos fans. Your inline tight end is your Daniel Graham. Your move tight end is your Tony Scheffler. Still Tony Scheffler. That's the difference, right? We need both. I would say we could do both. We can upgrade either of those, or both in the same offseason. I'm looking at, is there anyone in free agency, Zach? I know we were talking before the show. Juwan Johnson was the guy you were thinking about. Does that make sense for you as a move tight end?
I think Juwan Johnson is the name to watch. And I think that's a name the Broncos should absolutely go out and get. They're going to have some resources this offseason to sign some veterans. A swing on a T. Higgins might be tough, or some of those really expensive lanes to be shopping in. We'll get into that in a bit. But there's they have the room to actually make some moves this year, which they haven't really since the Russell Wilson trade. The problem is there's just not great options out there. I think Juwan Johnson is comfortably the best one. Pretty good receiver. Here's a fun little Juwan Johnson stat for you. In each of his 3 seasons in the NFL at tight end, he has had more. Wait, let me make sure this is right. Oh, he's just short. So his least productive season as an NFL receiver was 37 receptions for 368 yards and 4 touchdowns. Adam Troutman, during his entire Denver Broncos tenure, which is 2 seasons, so double the length of time, just to be clear, 35 receptions, that's 3 more, for 392 yards, it's like 30 more. Why can't I not find touchdowns all of a sudden? And not many touchdowns. 0 touchdowns. He must have not caught a single touchdown with the Denver Broncos. I don't see it in his. No, that can't be
I
right.
can't remember any off the top of my head.
Okay, no, I was looking at his advanced box score on a Pro Football Reference for a second. Excuse me. And 5 touchdowns during his entire Bronco tenure.
I don't remember the Troutman touchdown.
His other 2 seasons, he's over 500 yards. He's got several receiving touchdowns. While you're developing an option, because I do bet they draft someone at some point in this year's class, but if it's not Tyler Warren, that guy's probably not going to be ready to plug and play and immediately change that position. And guess what? That position needs to change immediately. Yes, they need a long-term solution too, but it also needs to change right now. Juwan Johnson knows the offense well, knows what will be asked of him, was brought in originally by Sean Payton, has blossomed into his tight end role, and I think would be a great addition for Bo Nix to have. We always hear about how a tight end is a quarterback safety blanket. Bo Nix didn't have a safety blanket this past year. Johnson would provide that.
Didn't at all. Did not at all. No athleticism, no juice out of that group, and then really not even that great of blocking out of that group.
And really quick, sorry, I know I went for a while. There's not any other great options out there, is the other thing. Like if you want to move tight end, your other best options are 30-year-old Mike Gesicki. That's probably it. Tyler Conklin is kind of like a do-it-all guy, but he's not overly exciting. And then your best options for like a true blocking tight end. Do you want the 41-year-old version of Mercedes Lewis? Do you want?
I am a sucker for Mercedes Lewis.
At 41, 41, maybe? Or how about the 31-year-old version of Pharaoh Brown or the 32-year-old version of Mo Alley Cox? Like, there's just not.
Mo Alley Cox is that old. Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, not that many. Mercedes Lewis, man, he's been the extra offensive lineman to a lot of teams in the NFL through his career ever since those Jacksonville days. People don't remember. I feel like he was playing with Maurice Jones-Drew. I feel like he was playing with David Gerard. I feel like he's been playing forever, Mercedes Lewis. As far as the draft goes, I mean, everyone in Broncos country knows Tyler Warren. He's an inline type of guy. I think he does. I think we overstate some aspects of him, Zach, on the timeline. He is special in a lot of areas. I think specifically in space, sometimes I'm looking at him and I'm like, man, he looks like Gronk running over that guy or stiff arming that guy or whatever the case may be. The part we overstate some things about him. He does need some work as a blocker, though. Like I think that is something that needs to be said. We need that's people are watching the highlights. He does have a lot of highlight level blocks. He also
potential's there.
Yes, the potential is there as a blocker. He does need refinement in his technique, though. I don't think he comes in day one and is a huge asset in the run game. He whiffs. He causes negative plays sometimes for that. And then to go along with that, he's not the greatest route runner. What he is really great at, though, is boxing defenders out and high pointing the football. So, yeah. Anyways, I'm off of that tangent. I've just been arguing with people about that. It's really good tight end class. Otherwise, and I like Warren, by the way. I have to throw that out there. I don't think he's that Brock Bowers level tight end prospect that everyone else is putting out there. Colson Leveland's an option. As a move tight end. Gunnar Helm is an option as kind of the in between inline and move tight end.
He's the guy.
There's a lot of different tight end options in this class. Ferguson from Oregon, Fannin, people like. There's a lot. Joe Brewer says Mark Andrews maybe. I saw Frankie throw this out on the timeline as well. What do you have to say about that, Zach Seegers?
I think there's a very solid chance of it happening. not maybe what I would most want to see happen, but I think it's a solid option for the vet move. Like I was saying, they needed to change right away. Mark Andrews would help it change right away. The Ravens are close to having to make a decision on Mark Andrews versus Isaiah Likely, and I think understandably they're gonna go Isaiah Likely there. Just he's the younger guy. Andrews is about to turn 30, and has not had his best seasons as of late. Has also dealt with a lot of injuries over the course of his career, and they can free up a lot of money by trading him. For the Broncos, it would also make a lot of sense. He would be making just under $6 million next year, which would be really cheap for a tight end. Yeah, a good value move. It's not going to be the long-term solution, but it'll give you a, top 15 to 20 tight end in the league, which is better than they've had in a long, long, long time. And you can probably get him for pretty cheap. The most expensive part of that transaction is going to be whatever pick you give up for him, which one would figure, is at most a third, right? So I think that would be very appealing to the Broncos.
Yeah, no, that would make sense. I mean, it would be a huge upgrade right away. I think a lot of people are going to have pushback because of the game he had recently,
Yes.
and that was atrocious. I feel bad for Ravens fans. That was so bad. But he would be a massive upgrade for the Broncos. It would make sense. I would be all here for it. I would like it if they made a move like that. I think a trade for a tight end that is good makes sense. It does make sense. Usually when you draft these rookie tight ends, it takes a little bit for them to get into the speed of the NFL. That's one of the slower developing positions in the league. So trading for one does make sense. Next position, though, Zach, wide receiver. This is a position you wanted to touch on. I feel like they need like an alpha one. That's what I feel like they need in this group. I think Cortland Sutton is nice to have. I think Marvin Mims is nice to have. I think they're kind of struggling in their depth past that a little bit, but I think more than anything, you need that alpha wide receiver one or a guy that can slide into that Z position specifically.
I fully agree, and I don't think that guy is out there in this class anywhere. Honestly,
I don't think so either.
Maybe it is T Higgins. Actually, before I go down that rabbit hole, do you want to grab the super chat quick?
Yeah, for sure. Kodiak Broncos podcast. Shout out to you. If anyone wants to subscribe to that podcast, make sure you're doing it. I'm convinced the Broncos might use a round one pick on tight end. Warren doesn't last past Indy at 14 in industry mocks now, and Loveland's inconsistent year due to quarterback/scheme may have him out of round one. What do you got to say about that, Zach?
Yeah. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say convinced. We're so early and the Broncos' needs are so wide ranging that I'm not convinced in any direction right now. Now, also industry mocks this early, I just don't think are overly reliable. We see so much shifting over these next 2 months, and some of that's guys who right now we expect to be late first rounders or second rounders climbing up 20, 30 spots. And then sometimes it's guys we project to go high, falling 20, 30 spots. And then there's always, the draft night surprises where Michael Penix goes way earlier than we think, or I'm trying to think of like a classic fall right now, like Miles Jack, falls out of the first round when everyone thought he was going to be a top 10 pick. So that'd be my one thing. I would agree with him. I don't think it's super likely. There's a lot of other avenues for the Broncos to address tight end this year that I think just make more sense. It's a really strong tight end class. They can, address it in the middle rounds. They could sign a Juwan Johnson. I think Kodiak's probably going to be right because I would bet against the Broncos drafting a running back in the first round too. Right? I think it's far more likely that they draft a different position. Like I would take the field over them drafting running back. That said, I still think it's very probable that they take a running back in the first round if Ashton Genty falls to them or they fall in love with a Hampton or a Caleb Johnson or whatever. So that's what I think about that. Kind of a wishy-washy not answer, but I I wouldn't count them out of anything right now.
I gotta agree with Kodiak Broncos. I'm not gonna lie with you.
Hey, go ahead.
I think I mean I could see the appeal with Warren in specific. I could also see the appeal maybe Sean Payton has with Loveland in the first round. I'm just trying to figure out. I think you have to be a really elite tight end to be considered in this round one selection. To get your ROI, return on investment, on a round one tight end, like the run of the mill 700 yards or 600 yards, it's not even run of the mill. That's really good for a tight end. If you get 600, 700 yards in the first round, or if you get 600 and 700 yards from your tight end, that's a damn good season for your tight end. Now, would I rather want that or a wide receiver that could get me 1,000 yards in the first round, right? Because that's the kind of equivalent there. Really good wide receivers give me 1,000 yards. A really good tight ends probably give me 600, 700 yards. I can count the elite tight ends on one hand. So it takes a really special prospect here. And that's why I was so convinced with Bowers, because I watched him and I was like, wow, this guy's ridiculous. I would draft him if I were the Broncos. I don't see that guy in this class. I would take advantage of the depth and I would take advantage of the niche those depth pieces offer me. There are good receiving pieces. There are good blocking pieces. And I would take advantage of that.
Yeah, I fully agree. And on the investment point, the thing about drafting certain positions high in the draft, a lot of it is those first round salaries, right? If whoever the Broncos draft is going to be making $4.5 million a year over their rookie deal. And this isn't the end all be all, but it's something to kind of keep in mind. 4.5 million. That's like I'm trying to see what Brandon Cooks is signing for at the very end of his career. So the bar for a receiver to, even hit even, let alone get surplus value is pretty low, as opposed to, a tight end making 4 million this year is like Jonnu Smith, who I'm pretty sure is in the Pro Bowl for the Miami Dolphins this year. It's just the cost for entry at the tight end position is much lower than it is at wide receiver or some of these other ones. So the bar for, same thing applies at running back, right? You can find a good starting running back for $4 million a year. So to hit on a first round running back, they at least have to be a good starter. That's the only way you're getting near your return on investment. For it to really be a hit where, wow, what a great pick, they've got to be a damn near superstar. That was the conversation surrounding Bijan in this draft, and we'll hear it a lot with Genty over these next coming months too.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. For me, getting back to the wide receiver point we were talking to before this, about that, I don't see the option available, Zach, to like get that wide receiver one type. I do think like Mbuka from Ohio State would make a lot of sense here as a guy that can block his butt off. He's really good at those crossing routes across the middle. He's tough as nails, and he blocks. Yeah, he's an actual C. And then you can move him to the slot as well, where he blocks his butt off too, closer to the line of scrimmage, and you can kind of use him as your Z. Okay, we don't want little Jordan Humphrey on the field anymore. We can put him in the slot as your blocker guy right there. That would make sense as well. Outside of that, Travis Hunter is the one guy that I'm like convinced is a wide receiver one in this class. Tet McMillan is a guy I would watch out for the possibility. Burden, if the Broncos were to draft him, I imagine him being more in a Marvin Mims type role than anything else. So I don't think that makes sense. I don't know. Is there anybody in free agency that you're considering there at wide receiver, Zach?
I think we got to talk about the T. Higgins of it all. And I love the names you highlighted there in the draft. I would say this to Broncos country. Only one team is going to win the T. Higgins sweepstakes. Like Green Bay, for example, a team that we might not think of as having like a serious wide receiver need. They're having T. Higgins talks right now because even though they have a lot of deep receivers, they're looking for that alpha guy too. And they think, hey, maybe T. Higgins could be that. There's a lot of teams. I just intentionally pulled like a kind of obscure one. that are going to be looking for T. Higgins' services this year. The Patriots, I think, are probably the most likely
Huge.
candidate.
Yeah.
They have comfortably over $100 million in cap space. They've got very few places to spend it. I think they are the heavy favorite to land T. Higgins. And the Broncos just frankly can't win a spending war against the Patriots if the Patriots want to win that war.
Yeah.
So I just one team is going to win this, and whichever team does win it is probably going to be signing him on a bad deal. Something that we haven't seen a lot of in the NFL recently. Credit to Robert Mays for pointing this out, but I think it's a good point. Is like the Jawan James or the Menelik Watson type contracts, where it's like, oh, this guy was like kind of okay at this other spot, but we're so desperate for an answer, we're going to pay him at the top of the market to come to our team and try and fill that need in free agency, because maybe it could work out. Teams have gotten a lot smarter about that. I think paying T. Higgins a Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb level salary when he's gotten to operate as the number 2 in an offense with a perennial MVP candidate every single year of his career is a big red flag. And that's not even mentioning the fact that he has had a series of nagging injuries over these past 2 seasons. These last 2 seasons for him have been his most injury prone. And I think he's an awesome talent. Like in a vacuum, I would not be dogging him like this. When the conversation is, do you want to pay him a Jamar Chase contract? I mean, that's the bar we're holding him up to. And I think he pales in comparison. I think the Broncos would be much better off signing a guy like Chris Godwin for probably half the price you would have to sign Higgins to. Fits more what the Broncos need. Another guy that fits Sean Payton, blocks his ass off, tough as nails. You worry about the injury some there, but I would much rather take that roll of the dice than, because that's the other thing with T. Higgins. You're not only giving him this big contract, it's going to be a Russell Wilson type deal where you're locked in for the foreseeable future. If it's a gamble that goes wrong for you, it's going to be very painful to get out of. And the Broncos are just now getting out of that type of shitstorm. I don't want them to immediately dive right back in.
Yeah, I'm more of the camp that in this offseason free agency wise, and just moving off just to, is final note here. I'm more of the camp that I would be looking to sign, not small deals, maybe starter level deals, but not huge deals. I'm not going out there signing huge deals this offseason.
I got one for you. So
Okay.
This is a great sleeper, I think, that because people are talking about Darius Slayton too. I think he fits there. Couple sleepers that I haven't heard mentioned that I think kind of makes sense. These are specifically Lil Jordan Humphrey upgrades. I know he's been the bane of Broncos country's existence. I picked up a couple potential upgrades. How about this one? Mac Hollins.
Block his ass off in your face. Borderline dirty, which, hey, that's the type of player you love to have on your team. Hate to play against.
Williams was Sean Payton's defensive coordinator, it should be noted.
Red zone target for sure. Mac Hollins. I remember the Raiders when he was on the Raiders. They loved to throw him those fade, like just quick fades in the end zone, and he would catch them. Not a bad one. Blocks his butt off. Yeah.
So that's one. This one's a deeper cut. I was looking at the list of free agents though, and it really intrigued me. A guy I've been a bit of a fan of for a while, Nicholas Westbrook-Ikhine. This is a deep.
Wow, Titans, right?
Yeah, Titans, bigger body. He had like 20 receptions this year and like 8 touchdowns. It was something bonkers. Like he had just a really bizarre stat
20
line.
catches, 8 touchdowns is the craziest stat line I've ever heard.
Yeah, I want to make sure I get it exactly right, but just wild how they used him, because he's this big red zone body, 6'2", 215 pounds. 32 catches, 9 touchdowns this year. Like,
that is nuts. That is a nuts stat line.
He was their go-to red zone guy on an offense that really didn't have any quarterback help, and he did really well in that role. Another big physical receiver, could help in the blocking game, and I think he's offering you more as a pass catcher than Mac Hollins or Lil Jordan Humphrey. I will say, I know Sean Payton has this rep of not spending big on wide receivers and that's true. There's
True.
very
Yeah.
generally only had one big money guy. That doesn't mean he doesn't invest it all in the position, right?
He drafts them.
That room, he drafts them, and then there have been veteran signings in the past. Let me see if I can pull it up right now. I was just looking at it earlier today. But you have to fill out that room somehow. It's never the big guys. It's not the big splashes. But I don't think the fact he's only paying the Michael Thomases of the world means he won't sign Lil Jordan Humphrey to fill out the room.
Well, we also saw Josh Reynolds this offseason.
Also true. That's kind of what I'm talking about. I think I agree that he probably won't sign T. Higgins. That's not his style. I think when we're having those conversations, it makes sense to bring up, hey, this guy's not a guy who's typically made those big swings at that position. I don't think it'll preclude him from, these more budget signings.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Everybody, I think that is it for today's show. I appreciate everybody who sat here and listened to us. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Seriously, shout out to all of you. Yes. Shout out again to Kodiak Broncos podcast for the $10 in the super chat. Thank you so much. If you guys have any draft questions, hit me up at LTB_Joey. If you have any football just in general, Zach's a genius when it comes down to the cap, when it comes down to writing, when it comes down to a lot of different Broncos topics. Make sure you guys are tweeting at Zach. I'm going to be happy to answer. I know Zach is as well. We're gonna try to be more consistent here with more shows. Zach and I have some special content we're trying to get going, something new for the channel. I don't want to give any hints, and I don't want to make any fake promises either. So keep an eye out for that. That's something we're playing with, trying to make something happen. And until next time, guys, go Broncos.
Check out Mic'd Up. I was on it, and I